Thank you, and good evening, everyone. And I will call this regularly scheduled virtual meeting of Town Council to order. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the agenda as circulated, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. For announcements, I'll start off with just the proclamation that will be posted online. So May is Lyme Disease Awareness Month, and I don't need to educate the people of Lunenburg County on the seriousness of Lyme disease and doing daily tick checks. And I'm sure most people know how to properly remove a tick. So a very serious Lyme disease is just so serious in Lunenburg County. So May 2021 is Lyme Disease Awareness Month. Any other announcements from members of council? Not seeing any. All right, we'll go down to minutes. You have the minutes of the April 12th regular council meeting. Any errors or omissions there? Hearing none, all those in favor of approval of the minutes, say aye.
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 Aye, and those opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion is carried. Thank you. And we'll go right down to 6.1, which is planning items, non-substantive amendment for the development agreement of Old Town Hills. And I will turn that over to our Director of Community Development.
Okay, good evening. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So tonight I'm going to share my screen here so that the presentation can come up. Just one moment. There we go. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yeah, we
Yes.
can.
Okay, great. Thank you. So tonight for your consideration is a non-substantive amendment to the existing development agreement for the property at 312 Dufferin Street, known as Old Town Hills. We received the application on March 5th and a completed application on March 29th. So first, to give you a bit of background, and I'll give you a bit of background and context and then get into what the amendments are. The town first approved to enter into a development agreement on this property in 2012. And that was then executed in 2013. And then there was an amendment request, a non-substantive amendment request in 2014 that was approved by council. There was a change in the property owners in 2015 and a subsequent application and approval of another non-substantive amendment in 2017-2018. Overall, the agreement is for a multi-phased residential development with a range of housing types. Both amendments to date were in similar vein to the 2017-18 one, where it was replacing the lot layouts, phasing and changing sort of the mix of housing types. And the details of those previous agreements, a summary of those details were provided to you in the report. So what has remained consistent throughout the development agreement is what is deemed a substantive matter. So all matters not identified in this subclause 19B are non-substantial, which may be changed or altered without a public hearing. And so those matters are a maximum. So this means if it's a substantive matter, so something that's identified here, then it would go through a full development agreement process, which would include a public meeting and first reading and a public hearing and second consideration. So to trigger that, it would have to be more than the maximum of 157 dwelling units. There would have to be a change to the minimum set front yard setbacks, side yard setbacks, lot areas, and lot frontages, the minimums for those, and there would be the addition or deletion of land. So the property is located at 312 Dufferin Street. The property itself is split between the town of Bridgewater and the municipality of the District of Lunenburg. So it's about 34 acres in total. The existing development agreement with the town of Bridgewater is for the phase 1 portion only. So on your screen, you'll see the town boundary line bisect the old former golf course, and the property line is then outlined in red, the overall property. It's adjacent to the Nova Scotia Community College, a large commercial area. So we've got everything from McDonald's to the Bridgewater Motel and Gateway Plaza across the street, as well as some low density residential on the other side of Dufferin Street. So I forgot to put this note in the draft of the presentation that you received, but on the left is the zoning, an excerpt from the zoning map, and on the right is the future land use. And you can see that the property itself is zoned comprehensive residential, which is intended to provide for a broad range of housing types and densities, as well as some limited non-residential uses. And overall, the future land use designations mirror the current zoning. So for the property itself, its future land use designation is comprehensive residential. And again, it has institutional over where the NSCC is, commercial along the edge of High Street and Dufferin, and some open space and recreation included in there as well. So the application was for a non-substantive amendment, and ultimately it's to consolidate lots 118 and 119, remove the 4-unit townhouse on lot 119, and replace the 24-unit residential currently proposed for 118 with a 34-unit residential building on the consolidated lots. And this, if I can get my screen to change, there we go, is a preliminary elevation drawing of the 34-unit residential building that they are proposing. So it's proposed to be 4 stories with underground parking. There'll be 3 one-bedrooms, 3 one-bedroom barrier-free units, 4 2-bedrooms plus a den, and 24 2-bedroom units proposed, as well as amenity space such as a gym facility, the underground parking, and balconies for each unit. So this is an excerpt from the overall site plan that was attached to the development agreement, the proposed amended development agreement, as well as the one that's in the current development agreement. So on the left side of your screen is the current plan, which shows the 24-unit building with parking to the rear and the side, and shows the 4-unit townhouse building here on lot 119. And on the right-hand side of your screen is the proposed change, which shows the consolidated lot with the 34-unit building and exterior parking on the, the left-hand side of your screen there. So the change has a larger building footprint with less surface parking. It still meets the setback requirements for the zone. And then we reviewed the the existing development agreement and the proposal, and determined the following changes were necessary to the development agreement. So what's proposed in the amending agreement that you have for your consideration this evening is to replace Schedule B1 with a revised layout plan that shows the site plan. To replace Schedule B2 with the revised phasing plan, which really just updates the phasing plan to show the consolidated lot. There's no proposed changes to the actual phasing of the development. 1A is still 1A and 1B is still 1B. To replace the full text of Part 1 use to describe the changes within B1 and B2, which increases the total units from 154 from the existing 148, which is still below the maximum density approved in the original development agreement of 157 units for Phase 1, A and B together. To replace Schedule D1 with a revised landscape plan. To revise Part 7D to reflect the consolidation and require retention of existing vegetation. To add a new section to 9B to set a maximum height for that 34-unit building, and to add a new section to change 10D to enable a variance from the land use bylaw requirements for bicycle parking, to enable indoor bicycle parking as well as outdoor, which is a slight variance from the land use bylaw. So I'll go through each of these changes in detail. So the text changes rather. So from part 1, the use. So this is to replace the existing section in its entirety. So it just describes phase 1A, phase 1B, the total number of dwelling units, and keeps the existing enabling provision that a sales office may be located in the existing structure formerly used as a golf course clubhouse during the construction of phase 1, and except as otherwise permitted, the provisions of the land use bylaw as amended from time to time will apply to any development. So, sorry, just staying on this one, this is where it also references the schedules B1, B2 as well. So then in part D, the landscaping and buffering provision is to replace the existing subsection with a new one that states, so it's keeping the requirement to establish a 1.5 meter opaque fence along the eastern boundary of lot 118, where the abutting land use is residential in accordance with schedule B1 and D1. So those are noted on those schedules. What's new is the addition that the existing trees shall remain, and approval of the development officer is required for the removal of any trees greater than 100 millimeters or 4 inches in caliper. This is a similar clause and requirement that is in a couple of other existing and recent development agreements. There's currently existing vegetation that acts as a buffer between the property, this newly consolidated 118 and 119 lot, and the existing property on the other side, the Bridgewater Motel and the other residential apartment building that I can't remember what it's formally referred to, something about the Flying Dutchman or something like that, I think is what it used to be called. I haven't been here long enough to remember that. So that's what's being proposed for part 7. What's being proposed for part 9 is identical to subsection A, which proposes a maximum height for the Street B 34 unit building of 13.5 meters or 4 stories, calculated height at average grade. And that's the same height provision as what is allowed for the 36 unit building proposed on Street A, which is already approved within the development agreement. The change to the parking is actually to change the subsection. It's actually subsection C, my apologies for that. But it's to, again, provide this variance for meeting the land use bylaw requirements for bicycle parking, because as our land use bylaw is written right now, it only permits all of the bicycle parking would need to be accommodated to the exterior of the building. And so this is, again, a similar clause to a recent development agreement that allows for the outdoor parking to actually be accommodated as a combination of some spots provided inside of the building and others outside the building. So there could be room. They have more parking proposed than is required by the land use bylaw. So we'll negotiate with the developer to reduce some of the parking inside of the underground parking to provide secure indoor bicycle parking. And the statement around it being no more than 41 feet from a building's interior access is a similar distance that we require for bicycle parking to be provided no more than 41 feet from a building's exterior access. So that's just to carry that through for the indoor if they choose to provide that. They could still choose to provide it all outside and they'd be within the land use bylaw requirements. Specific to wastewater offsetting, the proposed amendment was not subject to a wastewater offsetting study because there is a prior approval for a maximum of 157 residential units in phase 1. That is what how the current development agreement was written. And again, that was approved by council in 2012, well before we had our current understanding of our wastewater situation right now. The total units for phase 1 is 154 at this point. However, as a result of that, it did lead to the department has been thinking around how do we handle some of these older development agreements. And in reviewing the DA, we're proposing to you and to the developer that we put in a new clause 19C. So in the termination clauses, the current one says that the town of Bridgewater may discharge the development agreement if the construction of the development or the use described herein is discontinued for 12 months or longer. And we're proposing to replace that with a new clause that provides a time horizon of about 10 years from the date of the registration of the agreement, where council may review the agreement in whole or in part, and then may retain the whole or part of the agreement in its present form, negotiate a new agreement in whole or in part, or discharge this agreement in whole or in part. And for the purposes of this section, completion of the development shall be the issuance of an occupancy permit for each of the buildings. And 10 years may seem like a lot, but there's 154 units proposed to be built, and there's nothing built up there now. And it also includes the continued building of new streets to achieve the full Phase 1A and Phase 1B. And in thinking about the length of time it may take to build streets and actually get those houses and buildings built within 10 years, it seemed like a reasonable time frame, and would be much easier for us to enforce really than the clause C as it's currently written. And it provides really clear direction to council, to staff, and to the developer about what the options are at the 10-year mark should the entire phase not be built or completed, which is defined now as occupancy. So the developer is amenable to this. He reviewed it with his solicitor and is not opposed. And so this is for your consideration this evening. As I said, this new termination clause, the full agreement continues to govern, but it does provide some flexibility within the agreement with the incentive to complete the development within a time frame. And it also adds in the ability for a partial discharge that doesn't exist in the agreement at this point. So that's what's being proposed. So with all of that, which I know is a fair bit to take in, staff recommend that council approve the proposed non-substantive amendments to the existing development agreement. If approved, there will be notice of approval published in the South Shore Breaker that will initiate a 14-day appeal period to the Utility and Review Board, and also sets out a 12-month period to execute the agreement.
Thank you. Questions from members of council? There's a lot in there, I know. I'll start. I have one. I think we ask this every time. The provision for trees. So they're not supposed to cut down any trees bigger than 4 inches without talking to the development officer. What are the ramifications if they do?
The ramifications, that's a good question. Well, they're in violation of the development agreement if they do. So then we can... Sorry, because I'm still sharing my screen, I can't pull up the DA, which is on my computer, but then we have some of those, the enforcement clauses. We can require them to replant. Of course, it's hard to replant a mature tree, but we would be able to require them to replant. We would be able to take remedial action and as to make sure that it aligns with what is currently in the agreement.
Okay, thanks. Deputy Mayor Tanner.
I have probably 10 or 15 questions.
Fire away.
Jessica, why the change to a larger building?
So this particular developer is not developing all the buildings himself. Okay. And he had, actually in his application letter, he has a buyer of this lot. They would prefer to do a slightly larger building. It's part of their read of the market. Okay. And it enables them to provide a range of unit sizes within the building.
Okay. And did you get a sense of timeline for work to begin? Because based on the original DA, like we're at year 9, we're close to year 10, which kind of comes back to your extension to 10 years. Like, as a town, do we really want to wait another 10 years for anything to actually happen there?
We actually have some of his potential purchasers have already applied for permits that we can't even consider right now because we need this approval of this change to the development agreement for this one, not for everything. And we're also waiting on the province for this completion of subdivision.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this new non-substantive agreement does not then trigger a re-look or a revisit with the wastewater piece. Why not?
Because of the
nature of
way the development agreement is written.
Okay.
It is basically the intention, my understanding, I wasn't here at the time, but in reading through all the documentation and the former reports to council on this, the intention of setting a maximum density limit, and then that is the piece that is substantial, was to allow flexibility for, because it's a large development, they knew it would take time to build out, that then they could apply to make changes based on the changing market conditions. So providing for a range, provided that it's all still aligned with the original intention, providing a range of housing types, meeting the phasing requirements and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a couple more, but I'll let others speak.
Are there any other questions?
I had a couple, but Andrew asked them.
Okay.
Sorry.
So that new 10-year agreement that will start after this is approved for another 10 years?
After it's approved and then registered the way it's written, it will start when it's registered with the Land Registration Office. So they do have 12 months to execute the agreement after it's been approved, provided it doesn't get appealed.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And thanks, Andrew, for taking my questions.
Back to you, Deputy Mayor, for whatever your follow-ups are.
Sure. So Jessica, why, given the length of time this has actually, from DA to where we are now, and nothing really substantial other than some road work has happened and maybe some discussions with other buyers and so on, why wouldn't staff have broken down this development and said, phase, I think it's 1A, 1B, you've got 5 years for 1A, 5 years for 1B, and the trigger points on those are, does that make sense?
It does.
To sort of push some of the development or almost force the hand of the developer a bit to move things a little further.
Yeah, that's a good question. And to be honest, we were thinking about, they're going to build phase, they do have a phasing plan and it's completing phase 1A first before moving into 1B. So they can't, they'll have to work really fast. If it takes them 7 years to get 1A done, they probably won't make the timeline for 1B. And I didn't think about breaking it out that way. I'll be fair. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions from members of council?
One more, David, if I may. So the part of the property that's out in MOLD's district, they can't come in and do that before they do the parts in town, if they wanted to?
No.
I thought that was in our original development agreement. It said they had to do our phase first.
Yeah, just want to make sure that if it's in there, it's still in there, so they...
I'll double check. I'll be honest. I don't know I actually spent a day just trying to piece together so that I have one DA to read instead of reading 3 DAs and remembering which has been amended and which hasn't been. I'd have to go back to that to completely confirm that, but I can do that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Councillor Caldwell.
Thanks. A couple things. I do applaud the inclusion of the clause to retain the trees. It would be nice if we had some teeth to enforce that. It sounds as though if they cut down the trees, we can plant new ones, but that's not replacing mature trees. So I don't know if there was something else we could put in the agreement to sort of prevent the removal of the trees. And the other thing is I share some of the concerns Councillor Tanner has about waiting another 10 years. I mean, it's been 10 years already. That seems like a long time to just wait on someone to complete a development.
So what's the, sorry, Councillor Colwell, the question on the timing then is more of a comment, or is there a specific direction?
It's probably more of a comment. I mean, if council wanted to, if the intent of council was to shorten that timeline, I would consider that, but I guess more of a comment than anything.
So if I can just piggyback on that, I don't disagree with that. I'm wondering if the provision would be better to have both, right? So you recognize that it's going to take 10 years to build this whole thing out. That's fine, but I think the concern of council is waiting 3, 4, 5, 6 more years until they even begin. And it's great. It sounds like you have people coming with, with permit applications now, but if those don't materialize in a year or two, does this not remove our ability to discharge this agreement before that 10 years is up?
That is a good question. Sorry, I'm going to stop sharing the recommendation so that I can pull up the DA with all of the discharge clauses, because there are other discharge clauses.
I think that's what council's looking for. I think it's just another mechanism to say at some point, listen, it's been X number of years. You still haven't started. We're not waiting another 10 years, especially because right now they're grandfathered in not having to do the wastewater study. So to me, if there's no shovels in the ground in 24 months, I'd want them to have to redo the wastewater study. Like the free pass is gone to me. So I think there should be something there.
Yeah, just to say, so we are, as council has discussed previously, there is right now council has directed staff to consider a wastewater betterment charge. And there is, I think in the draft of that wastewater betterment charge, what's been discussed so far is to provide basically a time frame under which it wouldn't apply, and then after a moment it would start to apply. And so I believe in the consultation that we're doing right now with developers and the public on that, I believe it's a 2-year time frame where they would be allowed to build without being subject to the betterment charge, and after that they'll be subject to it. So we can, that doesn't fully address what you're speaking to right now. So there is an option here where you can defer making a decision on this right now and request a revision to the section 19 and a further discussion with the developer to come back at the next meeting.
I think that's a very big question. And I'm just looking at people's heads kind of nodding. I think there is a real concern around the table that another decade could come to pass. Now, the current housing market would say that if you miss this boat and have all that land to develop, then I would say if you don't do it now, then you're not going to do it. So I'm concerned that the timeline doesn't allow us to take suitable action until we get too close to that 10-year mark. And again, I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads saying yes. So, Councillor Thorburn, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, just wondering, what are they paying now for taxes on that property? They surely got to be paying something. I don't know who I'm directing that to. It's just a question.
I don't think we'd have that information at the ready.
We could get it though. If the desire is to defer, we can certainly bring that information back as well.
Yeah.
Councillor Frazier?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, has there been any information with regards to any land transaction sales for the individual lots that are there? Do we Does staff know that information at this point?
The subdivision hasn't been finalized because
Okay.
we understand from the developer that there are. We understand from, conversations and inquiries. There is nothing firm at this point because the subdivision of the land has not been completed yet. There's a hold there.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thanks for confirming.
Deputy Mayor. Oh, you had it.
I had it.
You had it again. You're on mute.
I swear Sandra's playing games with me here tonight. So if council were to defer, how does this proceed then? Can council defer with the suggestion that it get broken into sort of a multiple component development over X years, and this is a 5-year timeline now versus a 10-year, and you would then have the discussion with the developer to see whether or not they agree to that, and we go from there? Is that how it plays out?
Yeah, that's what a deferral would do.
Yeah,
You're deferring for information, and that would be for us to bring back the results of that conversation. Yeah.
Thank you.
For me, I'd want that. I like the old provision and the new provision. I'd want them both in there. I like the 10-year. It has to be built out in 10 years, recognizing 154 units, roads. That's going to take 10 years. But I also like that. Listen, if you don't start this thing within a year, we're going to discharge this development agreement. So I like the hybrid of what we normally put, right? We have that provision, you have 12 months or something like that, or we can discharge. So I'd like to see both. So I guess that means deferring it for 2 weeks, right? But it would be 2 weeks. And I hate to hold this up, but we waited 10 years. We can wait 2 more weeks to make sure we get this right. And I think just talking about the trees, because this affects every development agreement we have, I think we need to have a separate discussion on, if the development agreement says you can't take down the trees and you take down trees. I mean, we saw it. I remember my first or second term on council, we had a large development. They were told not to take down the trees. They took down all the trees knowing that the repercussions were just, hey, don't do that again. So if we could have a discussion as a council with staff and see what other communities are doing, whether it's, listen, all the trees over 4 inches are going to cost you $1,000 in fines, or you have to replace a mature tree. You have to replace a tree you take down with a tree of the exact age. Like, I don't know. But I think we have to have someone else is doing it right. I'm sure we can just not reinvent the wheel. But I'm sensing from council that we want a little bit more in this and want it to come back in 2 weeks. I'm seeing everyone nodding their head. So if you refresh your e-scribe, there is a motion to defer the decision and request additional information from staff and or the applicant. And if someone is prepared to make that motion, that would be fantastic. Councillor Conklin.
I move that Council for the Town of Bridgewater defer the decision regarding the non-substantive agreement to the development agreement at Old Town Hills Community Limited at 312 Dufferin Street and request an additional information from staff and or the applicant.
Thank you. Seconded by?
Second that.
Deputy Mayor Tanner. Further discussion? Hearing none. Question being called. All those in favor? Say aye.
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 And those opposed? Hearing none opposed, motion is carried. So this will come back in a couple of weeks. And if you have additional questions, please make sure through the CAO you send those, and then those will get to our director, who can make sure that those are addressed before it comes back. Okay, and it's everyone understands what council's looking for with that kind of a mechanism to make sure it starts and ends. Perfect. All right, thank you. Going down to reports and recommendations, we have the monthly building report for March 2021, which is nice to see. Things are busy, as we know. I'm hopeful for the whole province that communities are busy like ours. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to staff for those. And so we'll now move to 9.2, which is a surplus pumper truck, engine 4. I'll turn that over to the staff, I guess. Or is there an explanation or some details from staff?
Yeah. So if council remembers, last year we were advised by the fire department that the Shinnemakast Fire Department in Cumberland County had their fire station and their equipment destroyed by fire. So they were looking for some extra equipment to get them through until they could deal with replacement equipment. So the engine number 4, which is a pumper truck, was a reserve or a backup for the Bridgewater Fire Department. And we checked with our insurer and were advised that we could loan that through a lease to the Shinnemakast Fire Department through Cumberland County. And so we did. And we did that for 6 months and at least, and then we extended that for another one. So the lease expires it was expired March 31st, 2020. And since that time, I've been advised by our fire chief and deputy fire chief that the fire underwriters has advised that the tanker is surplus to our needs. It's no longer required to be in our fleet for insurance purposes. And obviously it's been away for a year, so it's been deemed to be surplus and no longer necessary. So the normal procedure for the town when equipment is deemed surplus is we determine how we will dispose of that. And given the value of the equipment, our policy would require that we dispose of it by public tender. But before we do, I wanted to have a conversation with council with respect to whether or not there was an interest in renewing the lease. I had a conversation with the fire coordinator for Cumberland County, and I was told that they haven't ordered the equipment and they're not too sure when that'll happen. And there's definitely an interest in renewing the lease if we were interested in doing so. I did advise that we may be looking at it as surplus, and if we did, would they bid on it? And that's a decision they would have to make. But if council opted to deem it surplus and dispose of it, they could, of course, bid on that at public tender. And per our policy, we would obviously sell to the highest bid. And so they're aware of that as well. If we were to dispose of it, the estimated value based on some research that our deputy chief did is that it'd be anywhere from 15 to 30,000. So it's not a high value, but there's still value in the equipment or the tank pumper truck. But we would remove the equipment from it. There's equipment that the fire department would like to reuse. If you extend the vehicle lease, it suggests that you might want to look at a year. The implications of doing that, of course, is that every year the vehicle gets that much older and the value goes down a little bit with that. So I'm not too sure what it would be worth in another year with use by a fire department, but it is definitely an option for council as well. So direction is, or decisions actually being requested by council with respect to whether you wish to proceed with the sale of surplus equipment for this tanker, at which time I would advise Cumberland County that we're going to deem it surplus and sell it for public tender, and the vehicle would be returned, or whether you wish to extend the lease for another term. And the lease did not have a fee associated with it. It was provided for free.
So they haven't ordered their replacement equipment, and just going by the time it takes for us to get replacement equipment, they're probably looking at the better part of a year before their replacement truck.
Yeah. If not longer, given delays with COVID and everything like that. So it would be quite I would suggest we would probably be looking at an extension in a year's time again. for another period of time. And I can't speak to the reasons why it hasn't been ordered, just that it hasn't. And so, yeah, it's that, as I indicated, I did say that if we deem it surplus, would they be interested in bidding? And I think there's an interest in it, but, you know, they understand that when you bid on something, it's the highest bid.
Questions from council? This is not an easy one. Councillor McDonald.
While it's leased out, is there, I think the agreement pretty much exempt us from any responsibility for repairs or any costs along those lines. Is that correct? And that would continue, I'd assume, in any further leases?
Yeah, so under the lease agreement, they're responsible for maintenance and to return it in the state it left. But as you know, with any vehicle, there's just every year it depreciates in value. They're also required to carry insurance as well.
Okay, Councillor Thorburn.
Yes, if I may, I have a few issues, few concerns. Number one, if they don't have a fire truck, I wouldn't want to take that one from them. They have it for a reason. And I don't believe for a minute, unless you send for them in a taxi, that we're going to get $30,000 for that old 96 pumper truck. It's not certifiable under the ULC Act for a fire truck anyway. So, and I was chief and been there for a long while, and we've never had an old fire truck go for that. We gave a couple away because they were going for fire service, but it may be worth that, but I certainly wouldn't know of anybody that would pay that. So I'm concerned that if we take that, they're going to be left without any fire protection, and I certainly wouldn't vote for that. You know, and it's not worth a lot. And even equipment on them, I was talking to the fire chief, and most of the valuable stuff was taken off. And a lot of that hose and stuff was bought back when I was chief, so it's pretty much expired anyway. So you're not going to get a lot of value for that. So that's my 2 cents worth. But I wouldn't vote for a motion that would take that truck from them until they had something to replace it. Sorry.
No apologies. Deputy Mayor Tanner.
So that they haven't ordered a new truck or placed an order for a new truck for whatever reason. Was there any consideration of them leasing the existing one from us for an amount, a set fee?
I haven't had that conversation with them to see if they would be prepared to pay a fee for using that. Last year we gave it without a fee, so
right.
Yeah.
It seems strange to me that you're getting a. I think the intent was we're going to loan you our truck for a little while you figure things out, and then you place an order for a new truck. So I think if they want to keep this truck going forward while they figure things out further, then I think it's in our best interest to charge an associated lease rate for it.
Thank you, Councillor Caldwell.
Yes, I understand why we signed this lease, free lease, because they were in a bind, and that's understandable. But I think our primary responsibility is to the citizens of Bridgewater, and if this truck has value, I don't think going forward it should be given to them for free. I think we need a lease with a cost associated for our taxpayers.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? I'll just say I was surprised that here we are. We're a year. Their fire station burned out a year ago this past weekend, and I understand why we did this. Cumberland County has been through way too much in the last year, but I thought that when we extended the lease 6 months ago, that was just to buy them time for their new truck to arrive. I didn't think that it was to buy them time to then still a year out not have placed an order. So to Councillor Caldwell's point, like this, we have an obligation to address this for the citizens of Bridgewater, and whether the truck is worth $30,000 or $15,000 if it's another year, it's not going to be worth that much. So I tend to agree with Deputy Mayor Tanner and say, like, if they're going to be another year before they have another truck, I don't mind them having our truck, but they're going to have to start really at least covering what will be the depreciation that will be the next year of their using this truck. So if it's going to take $5,000 or $8,000 off the price of the value of it when they return it to us, I think it's not unreasonable, to see that. They've had it for free for a year, so I think that's fair. Councillor Frazier, you have your hand up.
Yeah. Yes, I guess even though they would still be considered to have insurance, we were obviously carrying insurance on the vehicle as well. So I guess to me, a nominal fee would be covering our expenses, say looking into it as to what what our insurance cost is for the pumper truck. So I feel the obligation to help them out, but at the same time, a nominal fee to cover our expenses would be makes most sense to me.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's proposing taking the truck away from them. And I know I recognize your concern, Councillor Thorburn. You're right. You don't want to leave them high and dry. But I think in the spirit of cooperation and partnership, the burden can't be solely on one. It has to be a compromise. And I think coming up with, something that's fair for them as well as us makes sense. I see you have your hand up for comment.
Yeah, nothing too serious, and I somewhat agree, but I think in these times with the COVID-19 and the fire service's inability to raise funds, it may be a little more difficult. And I'm really not against charging him something reasonable and fair, but I think we need more answers to our question before we do anything. What is their intentions? How long do they need it for? So we can come up with a plan and something that's agreeable to both sides. I think I personally need more information. And maybe they want to return it to us now. You got to ask those questions.
I did have those conversations with him, and as noted, they would be interested in having the lease extended for sure, because it buys them some time to determine what they're going to do. So that was clear that they would be happy to sign another lease agreement.
But you didn't talk value or price?
No, because it was just, they were asking about an extension to the existing lease agreement, which is free.
Okay.
Yeah, and we
have that conversation.
Yeah, we can request that the conversation, we don't have to make a decision on the truck tonight other than directing staff to have a conversation with them. Councillor McDonald.
I agree with Councillor Thorburn in that, an extension of 1 year, does that give them enough time to fundraise, place the order and have it delivered, knowing that there are some supply chain issues in certain places and with certain products at the moment? Is a 1 year extension reasonable, or is there, could we be looking at 2, 3, 4 years extension based on the fact that they may not be able to fundraise for another year, or, because we don't know if they're in a position where they're just waiting to start fundraising again. Maybe they have the majority of the funds they need available, and they're waiting until they can place an order and supply chains are kind of opening up. Not knowing what the delay is kind of, are we really looking at because we don't want to kind of enter it blindly?
Yeah, I'm just I'm trying to Google Cumberland County's budget to see what kind of surplus they had this year or what kind of reserves they've got. Because part of my curiosity is you're right, Councillor Thorburn, COVID-19 makes it hard to fundraise, but I also know what the town of Bridgewater does to ensure our fire department is well equipped. And I would argue that we certainly would never allow our fire department to be short-handed on a truck for what is going to end up being 2 years. So if we hadn't loaned them this truck, what was the county going to do? So that some of mine county, I think, has to take ownership of their responsibility under the Municipal Government Act to supply fire services. And if you're going to supply fire services, you have to supply the vehicles. So all this is doing is leading me down the rabbit hole of more questions of why they have not ordered this truck. So I think if we really want more answers, I think we have to ask the CAO to speak to them, what the plan is, what the timeline is, and then come back and we can have this discussion after those answers. Councillor Thurman, I see your hand up.
Yeah, and thank you for that. No, there's just so many questions there, and I just like to see some fairness, and I'm not against charging them something, but we have to know what their intention and what their plans are going forward, so we can base our decision on what the requirements are. And we don't know if it's 1 year or 16 months or 2 years or whatever, but I'd like to have some clarity on what their intentions are, and certainly they should not be in a position where they don't have fire protection. I mean, that's what their residents paid for. So it's I'd just like to have some answers. That's all.
So can we ask those, looking to staff, can we ask those questions and have this come back to the next council meeting and find out, what their timeline is for ordering their truck, which would then lead to how long they need our truck for. And then once we have those, we can talk about, well, how much would you be willing to lease our truck? So if it's for a year, are they willing to pay $500 a month for our truck? Are they willing to pay $200 a month, $800 a month to lease the truck? And then council has that information to make the decision. Because I don't think it's fair that we help them for a year, but we can't help them forever.
Yeah, sure. That's fine. I have asked some of those questions, and it's very non-committal at this point. So, but maybe we can dig a little deeper and have some other conversations with their council, perhaps, to get a little bit of clarity too.
Well, and I would maybe suggest that if the answers are going to be non-committal, then the outcome is going to be predetermined. That I can't see council supporting loaning them a truck forever and ever without knowing that they're actively seeking a new vehicle. Otherwise, they have to buy our. We're not responsible for supplying fire services to other communities.
Yeah.
So this was to help them. So I think we're looking for more answers. If you will refresh your e-scribe, there is a motion to defer. Seems to be how we're going tonight. There's a motion to defer this so that staff can gather some more information. Is someone prepared to make that motion? As we all wait to refresh our e-scribe. Councillor McDonald.
Okay, I would move the town council for the town of Bridgewater. Oops, that popped right up in front of my, okay. Town council for the town of Bridgewater defer decision regarding the pumper truck engine 4 to allow further decision between staff and, oh gosh, I'm going to pronounce it wrong, Shimanak's Fire Department, my apologies, with respect to an extension of lease.
Perfect, thank you. Seconded by?
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Councillor Thorburn. We've had a good discussion on that, and like I said, this isn't about not helping them, but just need some more information and look out for what's best for both communities. We have mover and a seconder. Any further discussion?
Question
being called. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, motion is carried. Thank you. We're just building our agenda for 2 weeks from now. Our next item is tender 21-01E, portable toilet rentals. So you have the information in front of you. I'll turn that over to staff to run through it. Exciting topic.
Good evening. On April the 15th, the town received 2 tenders for the supply and cleaning of 12 portable toilets used at various parks throughout town between May the 1st to November the 30th. The approved budget is $33,200, of which $18,900 is from operations and $14,300 from the COVID restart monies. The lowest submitted tender was $70,846.69 net HST, a value of $37,647 over budget. Staff's provided some options for council's consideration. Option 1 would be to award the tender exceeding the approved budget using either COVID restart money or reserves to offset the cost. Option 2 would be not to award the tender because it's over budget. Option 3 would be to reduce the level of service such that the cost would be closer to the budget. That would be approximately 6 toilets at 5 locations, which would still result in about $1,300 being over budget. Or ask staff to explore other alternatives to provide the service. Staff are recommending option 1 to award the tender to Dalton Jodrey Plumbing and Heating for a total cost of $70,846.69 net HST.
Thank you. Mr. Feener, questions from council?
Well, there goes the sale of our fire truck. $8,000. Why is it so high, Larry, compared to other years? There must be a reason for that. I'm just interested as why it's so high.
We did ask that question. Some of it is administration. The others is that I guess previous years they guessed at what the cost would be because of COVID. So we previously were getting the toilets cleaned weekly, and of course last year we went to daily. And what they found, I guess, is that not only did they need cleaning inside, they also had to be pumped, so there would be disposal costs and things as well. So they were being used more, and that wasn't factored in last year's costs.
Deputy Mayor Tanner.
So this amounts to about $1,000 a month per toilet. So I'm either in favor of literally not providing public toilets to people who visit our town or residents inside of town for this year, or reducing the service by at least half.
Okay. Other questions? Councillor Caldwell, and then I'll turn it over to the CAO.
Could this over expense, could this be applied to the money we received from the provincial government regarding
the COVID restart
for COVID? Yeah, COVID restart funding.
Would you like me to answer?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, that is one of the recommendations, that we could use some of that money for the COVID restart money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Jamie?
Yeah, so we do have some funds left in that, and there's about $70,000, I think, that's not allocated right now that we could use. The only concern is that what other costs are we going to incur that it's unforeseen at this point. So that provided a little bit of a contingency for us in terms of dealing with COVID-19. But this is an example of that extra cost that we're going to incur. Last year, we didn't put our porta potties out in all of our parks because we were looking to cut costs and expenses, and we knew that we had to clean them. And last year, I believe we cleaned them twice daily, and this is once daily that we're doing it now, and the costs are still higher. So we would have, and I think talking to Sandy with engineering, she indicated that they have a good idea based on the clean out of them, which ones are used more. So if council wanted to go to half or stay within the amount that we budgeted, then we could put them in those areas that seem to have a higher demand.
Councillor Brashear.
Yeah, I was just curious with having less, I know they're in, town property, town parks and so on, but with having less public events, I'm just wondering if staff feel that they're still going to be used as much. If we could maybe go to, obviously, you have a good idea as to what ones are used more frequently, and I would suggest that we try to stay within our budget as closely as possible to keep things in line.
Other questions or comments? Oh, that was, look at that, same time. Councillor McDonald, then Councillor Caldwell.
So initially, when I was looking at this, I thought, we've increased the level of service on a few services because we're recognizing that people are spending more time outdoors, but this is one of those things that you have to clean a whole lot extra because people are spending more time outdoors. When the way Deputy Mayor Tanner said, broke it down and kind of pointed out that that's $1,000 a month per porta potty. That's an excessive expense, in my opinion. As much as we want people to be outside and we want to raise that level of service to encourage that and support that being outdoors and the mental health that goes with it and so on, that to me is excessive. And I'm absolutely on board with the Deputy Mayor that I would support either not having that service this year because of the excessive cost in providing it, or at least cutting it by half.
Thank you, Councillor Caldwell.
I agree with Councillor McDonald. That's all I have to say.
I just wanted to add, like, I've seen some communities, they're very clear with their signage that just says, that these are not, whether it's the portable washroom or the washroom in a business that's for public use or like a mall, and they say that, these washrooms are not cleaned, I don't want to say regularly, but I'm trying to think of the wording. But basically they're saying, listen, because of COVID, these aren't clean to the same standard that you would think like your washroom at home is or something. So you're responsible, wash your hands, use your own sanitizer, but we can't just have someone come in. $1,000 a month is excessive. So I don't know why we have to increase the standard that we would have had pre-COVID instead of just, making a note, use at your own risk, with one of those COVID protocol signs, wash your hands, just like we see everywhere. Can't we do that?
So we were following public health protocols for washrooms, public facilities, essentially, and even though they're porta potties, they're still provided to the public. So we had an extensive conversation with public health last summer with respect to what are the cleaning protocols, and they had recommended at that time it was twice a day, but some places were cleaning it once and posting a sign saying this washroom is cleaned at 2 p.m. or whatever time during the day it is, so the public knew when it was last cleaned. But that's based on the recommendations of public health at this point, given the pandemic. When we're out of the pandemic and just back to business as usual, then obviously we could reduce the cleaning down to what was pre-COVID, which was once a week, is what you're saying, right, Larry?
Yes.
Yeah.
Councillor McDonald.
I don't think that this plays into this decision, but just I guess kind of a general question. When sites, when places are reported where somebody who has tested positive has been, do parks fall into that? So I mean, if we were providing porta potties, and now somebody has tested positive and they say, oh, I was at Shipyards Landing, do they have to report Shipyards Landing because we've now provided kind of a public site by providing a porta potty?
Well, I can't.
Just more of curiosity, sorry.
Yeah. Like we don't keep a list of people been in our parks, so it'd be basically based on public health, perhaps doing that tracing back to where they were. And if they identified that they were in one of our facilities, washrooms or whatever, I think that we would be notified of that. and they would follow their protocols for notification as well. So they would determine whether or not that was something that they had to put as a spot where someone who had COVID-19 visited.
Did you have a follow-up, Councillor?
Please, yeah. So there's been no communication saying if you're providing a service like porta potties or something that's a high touch area, that you need to inform public health in your area so that when they're doing tracing, they know that they need to consider those locations?
No, it'd be no different than like the LCLC or even our town hall and the public washroom we have here. It's up. They do that tracing through the individual who has COVID-19. Where have you been? And they trace it back that way. So it was really rely on them to find that out and let us know. We don't give them a list of all of our public facilities because really it goes back to where was that individual.
I look at the sites that are on the list and I look at them all and go, these are important locations to have porta potties. And we know that last summer we had actually people demanding more porta potties just because more people than ever were outside. But I keep going back to the fact that these are washrooms. They're public washrooms. Whether this was pre-COVID or not, whether it was a porta potty or a subway station, to me, it's generally accepted that not always the cleanest places to be. So you wash your hands and then you wash your hands and you use your sanitizer. So I can't help but think that people are already very well aware that a public washroom is not going to be hygienic in terms of you're not going in and eating your lunch while sitting in a porta potty. So I think they're already putting in the effort to be careful. And I just keep going back. I'd love to know if we can find out from public health or even from our insurer, can we not just post a sign that says these, I just Googled it quickly. It said, pre-COVID, once a week was acceptable to clean a porta potty. So looking at that, couldn't we just say these washrooms are only clean to pre-COVID levels? Please ensure you are sanitizing and using proper hygiene. That's all Dr. Strang is telling us now, right? Is when you go into a store where you go into if I go into a store and go in and use their washroom and leave, I'm being told, make sure it's proper hygiene.
We can certainly ask that question. We were just, as I say, we were following what public health told us to do, but what happens if we don't? Do they have any concern with that if we sign it saying it's clean to a lesser standard? They may, like last summer, as I mentioned, there were some that were only cleaning, some municipal units were only cleaning it once a day, and they posted it that way to say once a day, even though public health at that time was saying, we recommend twice, but you can do once, but our recommendation is twice. So we can ask that question to see if we can get away with something a little less strenuous in terms of, I guess, the implications financially for doing it and posting it so the public's aware.
And what that would do to our cost, yeah.
Yeah, we can see if it does lower our cost any.
Councillor Thorburn.
I'm in the deputy mayor's camp. Maybe the sign should read use at your own risk or something, because certainly we're not going to have that much travel with the restrictions that was come out today anyway. So, maybe we could postpone putting them out for a couple of months and then get more data. But I certainly wouldn't spend 1 cent over what we paid last year. I think that because that money that we have in that grant money we're in the third round now, and people are starting to work from home, and we're going to use that and more.
I sense a request to refresh. I don't know. This is probably a not. Is this to defer or to not award the tender? I feel like we need more questions answered in terms of what we can do. It's not the locations. It's not the proponent. It's the level of service. Yeah. Tammy.
I'm just trying to figure out what's going on with the screen.
No, go to the X right next to where your mouse is and hit the X.
There is no X.
Where it's next to the microphone, where you're sharing your screen, or somebody's sharing their screen.
Yeah. I don't think it's me.
So whoever's doing that, go a little bit over to the left and hit the X next to your microphone button. So there should be your camera button, your microphone button, and next to it is the X. One more right there.
One, yeah. Okay.
There we go.
So I was just going to suggest that if council's concerned about going over the amount budgeted, then if you're happy to award based on staying within the budgeted amount, then we're left with two options. One, we find out whether we can reduce the cleaning requirements to make it work within that budget amount, or we reduce the number that we put out to stay within that budgeted amount.
Deputy Mayor.
For me personally, I'd rather have a clean environment and less units out there. So, look at the volume areas and pick 6 higher volume areas and keep them clean, I guess, for the public.
Councillor Caldwell?
I agree with sticking to the original budget, but I do wonder which ones may we be looking at eliminating in that case.
So we would go based on I guess popularity. So we know based on our contracts where the volumes are, and we would look at that. Yeah. So staff know the parks that are used most frequently. And last year, that's where we ended up putting most of them. So if you remember, we reduced our number last year as well, and we went to those areas where we have more frequent users.
Okay, Councillor Thorburn. Actually, see, Larry has his hand up. Why don't we see? Larry might be answering some of our questions here. Larry, can you go first?
I guess I do have the list of the 5 most popular locations: Shipyards Landing, the Kinsman Field, the bottom of Silvers Hill, the skateboard park, and the LaHaye Ball Field are the 5 more popular locations, if that helps.
Thank you.
That's good information for sure, yeah. Councillor Thorburn.
Yeah, well, I was going to make either one motion to reduce the level of service, I think, which is number 1, or the last one, number 4, and defer the decision and staff investigate the options and report back to council. So I could make either one of those motions and feel comfortable with it.
My concerns with reducing the number is, like, right off the top, you're eliminating the St. Philip Street, the new the playground that we just redid, which I'm hoping will get used even more this summer. That would eliminate Aberdeen Green. There's just, I don't know how you pick and choose, and I have a feeling that we're just going to be asked for, just like last year. I remember people midsummer were like, we need a porta potty here, we need a porta potty there, because people were out walking and doing more things. Unless council wants to stay within the budget, pick those locations, wait to see if the public ask for more, and in the meantime also figure out what the standard is that we can reduce to without compromising public safety. That's a lot. Deputy Mayor.
We're spending a lot of time on this topic, but the one at the skate park as an example, we've got a beautiful big public facility right next door. They just cut through the woods and they've got washrooms, tons of them. So, why would we bother putting one at the skate park? I guess if budget is an issue, then anyway, just a comment.
How is this the hardest topic we faced tonight? I don't know.
When you gotta go, you gotta go.
I guess just to get us somewhere, for me, the starting place is staying within budget, putting out as many as we can within budget, starting to ask those questions of public health, like what can we do to reduce the requirements so that we can free up some money to add more. Because if it is a beautiful summer, we are going to have people calling saying, we need one here, we need one there. And I hate to see the option of what happens when people cannot find a public washroom when they're on a trail or in a park. And then we get those calls about, can you come and clean this up? Councillor Frazier.
Yes, I know in previous years we've had one at the farmers market on King Street, which is now in a new location for the summer. Just wondering if the plans had a porta potty for them.
Or are they able to use the washroom in the
Yeah, I guess
facility?
is there facilities there, or is that just for staff?
Larry, do we know?
I think they provide their own, don't they, Larry?
I was just seeing if
It's not-
that's,
yeah.
it's
They've
not
asked us for a
on the
grant
list.
in the past, like a partial
Yeah.
grant, but in the
Okay.
last few years, I don't believe we've paid for it. We paid for it the first few years, and I remember, a little bit of a plug for past MLAs. They've funded the porta potty, so if there was a future MLA that wanted to fund the porta potty at the farmers market, so I know a lot of people have kind of sponsored that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Caldwell.
I've used the washroom at the new farmers market in the building.
Okay, so that answers that one, I think. Larry.
I guess that was one of the things I was going to mention. It wasn't on the list, therefore they'd be inside. But the other thing is we are applying for a grant as well for this. Not to say that, we're going to get anything, but we are applying for a grant, and that may provide more options for locations or numbers.
Okay. Tammy?
Yeah, just a question, Larry. The tender, we asked them to bid cleaning based on once per day, and I see that. I guess do you think that's going to affect price any if we reduce that, such as the other bid might have been? Is it that much of a substantial change to the specs that it would cause us to have to go out again?
I think we'd want to clarify from JC that we can negotiate with the lowest tender.
Yeah, so we'd need to, if you want to reduce your standard, I think we need to have that conversation with legal counsel.
So I feel like we need to defer this until we get those answers. Unless council is just happy to stay within the budget at the current level of service, and then see if we get whatever, if we get awarded a grant, or if we do get calls, we find the money for that for additional units at the current standard. So the question now is, do we want to investigate reducing the standard, or do we want to just go ahead with the current standard, and I'm sensing within the current budget? That one I'm seeing a few heads nodding. So awarding the tender within the current, like not going above the original budget. Okay. Hang on, it's frustrating to have just one screen and bounce back and forth between everything. I know poor Sanders, like there's a whole bunch of motions now.
Yeah. Would you like a motion?
Yes, please.
I move that town council, the town of Bridgewater, direct staff to reduce the level of service of portable toilets being rented, i.e. locations, service and/or service period, to bring the total cost down to the budget, with the locations of the portable toilets being determined based on known usage of each unit per location.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Everyone's fighting over it. I heard Councillor Thorburn first. So motion's on the floor. So reducing the level of service, staff will determine the units where they're going, remaining in the current budget, not the increased one. Any further discussion on that? So just for clarification, if we're awarded a grant, this would allow us to would simply put more out in the locations that we didn't put them out based on the sheet.
Mayor Mitchell.
Yes.
We've noticed that that motion does not include the award of the tender. So we just need to add a clause to award the tender based on that reduced level of service.
So it's to award the tender and direct staff to reduce level of service?
And to whom?
Dalton Jodrey Plumbing and Heating Limited.
And it's to reduce the locations, not the level of cleaning service. Yeah.
Okay. Mover and the seconder agree to the awarding the tender to reduce the number of locations, not the level of service, awarding it to Dalton Jodrey.
I do.
Okay.
I do, because we all have to go.
Okay. This is, wow, we're off to the races. Our first virtual meeting after a long time in person, and now everyone knows why people don't like virtual meetings. Okay, further discussion on this topic. Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Hearing none, motion is carried. Wow, that was awesome. Business arising unfinished business, amendments to policy 77, grants to organization. So just as a reminder to ourselves and the public, we gave notice to this April 12th council meeting. So the notice was that this was going to come back. And so here it is now, and I'll just turn it over to the CAO just to run us through it quick.
Okay, so these amendments for grants organizations basically just provide wording that will give council the flexibility to, and the committee to consider applications that don't come in within the deadlines, but might come in midpoint between there, if they feel that it warrants award separate from those intake periods. And that was recommended by the grants review committee to council. And if you look at section 5 of the policy, that's where you'll see the wording. There. Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
I can hear you.
Yeah, okay, I got you now. Sorry. So you heard none of that, huh? Okay. So can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. You're on mute. That's why I couldn't hear you. So the policy was changed. The proposed changes to the policy are basically to give council the flexibility to have a alternate time to consider applications outside of the intake periods that you normally have for receiving grants. So you have 2 intake periods where the deadlines are March 1st and September 30th. And the changes essentially just recognize that there will be perhaps applications that would warrant consideration, but haven't been submitted by those timelines. So it gives you the flexibility to do that. And section 5 of the policy is where you'll see those changes.
Okay, perfect. Any questions? I forgot my microphone had a mute button on the actual microphone, so I'm like, I don't know why it's muted. Not hearing any questions. Is someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Caldwell?
I move that council for the town of Bridgewater approve the revised policy 77 grants to organizations as presented in document 20-051C as policy for the town effective immediately.
Perfect, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Frazier. Thank you. Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Hearing none, motion is carried. Thank you. And 10.2 is grants to organizations emergency assistance fund. As you recall, we had some unspent money that we went out to the community and carried over to make sure that where there was a need, we could fill that need. And so clearly there was one, and so that's there. I don't know if the CAO has anything to add to that.
No, Jessica just popped up to if council has any questions with respects to the recommendation of the grants committee for award to those various organizations.
Just quickly, there were 11 organizations that applied. So Bridgewater Baseball, the Seahawks Football, Bridgewater Shuffleboard, Western Riptide Hockey, the Bridgewater Curling Club, LC Judo, the South Shore Fieldhouse, the YMCA, the Bridgewater Farmers Market, Senior Wheels, and Kinship Dance. And they all received $1,000. Well, they're all receiving a recommendation for $1,000 in funding. Their reasons for seeking assistance are about lost revenue from the inability to hold events, fundraise, or the low membership and or enrollment in the programs that they offer to the community. The increased costs of cleaning supplies and PPE purchases, and general increased costs due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the protocols. So if council chooses to award all 11 applications, there would still be a remaining $4,970 left in the GTO budget from the 2021 fiscal year.
Questions from members of council?
Would you like a motion?
Yes, please, Councillor Thorburn.
I see Cheryl has a question first.
I was just putting my hand up for the motion, so.
All right. I would move that council for the town of Bridgewater endorse the recommendation of grants to organizations committee and award emergency assistance grants as presented in document 21-026A and as follows, each in the amount of $1,000. JC Judo Club, Bridgewater Baseball Association, Bridgewater Curling Club, Bridgewater Shuffleboard Club, Seahawks Minor Football Club, Kinship Performing Arts Center Association, Senior Wheels Association, Bridgewater Farmers Market Association, YMCA of the Southwest Nova Scotia, South Shore Fieldhouse Society, and Western Riptide Female Hockey Zone.
Okay, thank you. Seconded by?
I'll second that.
Deputy Mayor Tanner, thank you. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. And our final item of business is Bridgewater Anti-Racism Task Force Assistance with Communication Strategy. And I want to take this time to thank our CAO who helped that task force for the last couple of months through its strategic planning sessions. So as council knows, our CAO runs a pretty lean and mean strategic planning session. So other communities don't get any ideas about taking her for that. But so she helped the task force through that, and it was interesting. Like, it was just, I think a lot of people were surprised of where it went, and you know, that Tammy led us through that really, really well. So out of that came some need for some resources, which require, because it's a committee of council, requires some council direction. So I don't know, Tammy, if you want to just add on to that.
Sure. So the task force also, just kind of to update council, given that they are a committee of council, the priorities are noted there. So it's the 5 of them, and kind of what the issue is they're trying to resolve and what the outcome would be if they did resolve those. So the data collection is one where they would need a community profile to understand the needs. And so they're going to take that on themselves, drawing on resources as may be needed. The communication strategy is the one where they're asking for some staff resource support from the town. And that's, they want to be a voice for anti-racism and to be a resource, and they need that strategy to do that. From the town's perspective, it also, by providing the staff resource, it helps ensure that it's aligned with the town and its communication strategy and protocols and how that all works as well. So there's some advantage to providing that support to the committee to ensure that it's consistent with how the town communicates, because it is a town committee. The next is safe spaces for conversations. So they want to know what does the community need to have those conversations, and the community needs to understand who the task force is. So the outcome would be, observable in terms of conversations being held. They feel comfortable, trust, improved decision making, and there's a consultation and engagement plan developed that reflects and provides for all of that. Team of experts is they want to develop a team of experts to be a resource. And then lastly, review of the town of Bridgewater policies, procedures, and practices. So they want to ensure non-biased policies, procedures, and practices of the town. And the outcome would be a clear understanding of any institutional barriers. They're identified and they're removed to ensure inclusivity free of systemic racism. So they're going to take that on as well and develop that lens, so that tool that would be used to review our policies, procedures, and practices. So really the only area where they feel that they need to draw upon town resources is on the communication strategy side of things. And I've had that conversation with Patrick, and if it's up to council whether or not council wants to provide those resources, but staff do feel that there would be value in it to provide for that alignment in terms of their communication and how they communicate, and ensure it aligns with council's expectations as well.
Thank you. Questions from members of council? Councillor Caldwell.
Would there be a cost associated with this, or is this more of a movement of staff, just shuffling of the deck of sorts with staff resources? Yeah,
so it would be using essentially Patrick, so Patrick's time. So what that would mean is that if council agreed to provide the resource support, then we would, Patrick would have to meet with the committee to determine their expectations in terms of timeline, and then advise me how he thinks he can accommodate that, or does it need to be pushed out a bit, extend it, so that we could fit it in. So the intent was that we would fit it into the existing work plan, and if there is anything that had to be adjusted on council's side in terms of council's priorities, we would advise council of that.
Other questions? Is someone prepared to make a motion?
I move that council of the town of Bridgewater refer the request for assistance with the communication strategy from the Bridgewater Anti-Racism Task Force to the CAO to determine a capacity and staff work plans.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Caldwell had his hand up first. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Hearing none. Motion is carried. Thank you very much. We have an in-camera meeting after, so I'm going to ask council to remain on Teams. And just before I ask for a motion to adjourn, I know just speaking to the members of the community, I know there's great concern over the number of cases of COVID that our province is facing now. Today, again, was a record number of cases that we've never seen since the beginning of the pandemic. But I just want to remind people that while we have to be very diligent here, and we have to always assume that COVID is around us in our community and act accordingly, people are doing that. We only have 3 active cases right now that public health is reporting in Lunenburg, Queens, and we know that Dr. Strang mentioned today that cases are going to go up before they go down. And he also reminded us that the 66 cases we saw today are essentially from last week. So the restrictions that were put in place on Friday have not yet been reflected in case numbers. And so he said it's going to be a few more days before we start to see the plateau and see those restrictions really start to take effect. But again, reminding us that we did this before last year. We did it again in December and January when HRM was essentially locked away from the rest of our communities. And again, we reduced case numbers. The one that I really remember is in January when we were told we were going to have 4 weeks of not being able to go into the central zone. And it was less than 2 weeks later that they lifted those restrictions because people got to work and reduced those cases. So while there's variance at play and these cases are high, we should definitely kind of be on red alert. I think it's important to remember that there's a reason why our province has been one of the most successful jurisdictions in the planet, and we continue to be, and we will be, because we're going to mobilize, we're going to be united, and we're going to beat this thing back again. So I just want to reassure the members of the community that have faith, stay safe, listen to Dr. Strang and his team. We all know what to do, and so we'll get through this together. So. Stay focused and stay safe. And with that, can I please have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Thorburn, seconded by Councillor Fragier. Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.